Hello, Church of the River family. Hopefully you had some time to get into 1 Peter chapter 3. Let's dig into this together. We're continuing in this section of 1 Peter that's all about alien honor. This is part 3, and we're tackling marriage today. Peter has really been focusing in on these 3 places because these are some of the hardest places to represent our King, Master, and final husband, Jesus Christ. The first thing that you need to remember is that throughout this, the marching order that we have comes from chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, that we are to be living in a manner of life that is honorable, that is beautifully winsome to the onlooker. Even in the hardest places, we are to live honorably with a sense of honor for those in our life. And the goal ultimately is to win them to Jesus Christ. So this section, if you really break it down, kind of reads like a how to win your oppressor to Christ kind of a section. How to shine Jesus in some of the darkest avenues of your life. How to be salt, even in a place where you yourself are hurting and in need of healing. Edward Clowney put it this way: Peter, in this section, sees the impossible position of the Christian as a remarkable opportunity to bear witness to Christ. And that's what we need to see here, that each of these difficult situations is an opportunity. These impossible situations is an opportunity to shine Jesus in an extraordinarily weird and alien way. Certainly marriage is one of those impossible situations too. Now, for those who aren't married and you're tempted to turn this off or tune it out, I would just say this: that the principles applied in this situation definitely apply to your life too. Let's jump into together. Chapter 3, verse 1. It says this: Likewise, as in just like before, likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands. All right, that's just a one-liner. We're going to focus on that for a little bit. As you are letting that sink in, you're probably feeling a little worried for me today. I might be sweating a little extra as I get into this topic today, but let's break it down. Likewise, meaning in the same manner as before, be subject. That term, be subject, is a military term. It's an order and a rank term. And ultimately, it's been applied to citizens, it's been applied to masters, and now masters and slaves, and it's being applied to wives and husbands. Note here that Peter is intentionally starting with the country, going to the workplace, and now he's in the home, ultimately right in the marriage. He's zooming in as he goes, and ultimately it's getting a little bit more personal, a little more intimate, a little more emotional. I would submit a little harder as he goes as well. But also don't forget, as we get into this, that the call here is to be Christ, to live in his manner, which is talked about at the end of chapter 2. Meaning that Christ's pattern, Christ's manner of living should be present in every Christian marriage. But that does not make it easy. No. This choice, this be subject choice we have because we are free. Second chapter of Peter, verse 16. We're free. And so this is a choice, but this is an extremely hard choice. And you better believe it was extremely hard back then. You see, being subject to a husband back then, it was way crazier than it is today. See, women were treated as possessions, objects. There was routine abuse openly. Sometimes it was completely acceptable and it was legal in its practice in the Roman Empire where this is being sent to. This is certainly a difficult place to be subject to your husband. Not to mention, many of these women that are hearing this for the first time from Peter, this apostle that's held in high regard, they're hearing from him, hey, be subject to your husbands. Meanwhile, they know that their husband isn't a believer and he is outright hostile to them because of their faith. Notice the call of this passage is for them to bloom where they're planted, to shine in some of these dark situations, which totally goes with 1 Corinthians chapter 7. They're not trying to get out from the difficulty. They're trying to shine and bring Christ into it. This impossible situation is an opportunity for them to show Jesus Christ. Again, though, when you hear the word submit as they did then, there is this heart cry of why. Certainly the ladies that are listening to this back then are thinking that, and certainly in our culture today, this is not only a foreign concept, but this word can be treated with a tremendous amount of hostility. Why? Why number one is this. This has been God's design, His order from the beginning. We see it in Genesis 1 through 3, and He tells us it repeatedly in the New Testament. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Ephesians 5, Colossians 3, 1 Timothy 2, Titus 2. Hopefully you take time to check out these passages. They're everywhere. It's even in Revelation. There's a lot of passages. They're just some references. And you're going to notice as you get into these passages that the roots for this and the roots for this teaching aren't cultural at all. They go right back to creation and the fall. And they go right forward to Jesus with His bride. That's the roots for this teaching. You see, everything that was made in the beginning was good. It was sovereignly designed and it was purposefully ordered at creation, and it was good. But since then, the fall has made everything a whole lot harder, including order in a marriage. Now, a little pastoral side note about this trigger word, submit. I want to say what submission is not. Submission is not a matter of value. It's not like the person, because of their rank, is better. Not at all. If anything, in the Bible, leading means serving. Submission is not a matter of capacity. It's not about leadership skills. It's not about gifts or even intelligence. Those aren't precursors to submission, or else you would never listen to the government and you'd never listen to your boss. It's not a prerequisite to following somebody into evil. Submission, no. No, just as when the government tells you to do something wrong, you ought to obey God rather than the government. In the same way, when your husband tells you to do something wrong or your boss tells you to do something wrong, you ought to say no in the most honorable way. Submission is also not, and hear me on this one, it is not an excuse for abuse. Unfortunately, historically, the sad reality is that these passages have often been weaponized by evil men, evil husbands, to do horrific things to their wives. I want you to hear me well. If you're in an abusive relationship right now, I want you to come and let me know, because I believe that the church has a responsibility to help protect you in those situations. Lastly, submission. Submission is not a call to mindlessness. Just because some guy is a leader does not mean that you just are quiet. You cease to offer your opinion and you just completely unplug your brain. No. You are meant to engage and partner with him. In fact, listen, men, I want to address you. A leader that does not take in information from other people ends up playing the idiot, okay? So what I'm saying is this: a wise person knows what they don't know, and when it comes to men and women, they understand and they're in tune to some things that you need to know. So don't exclude them. Include them. Their opinions are more than valuable. Next, why? Why submit? Number 2, well, to win the believing or the unbelieving husband. Look back at verses 1 and 2. So that, this is the purpose, right? So that even if some do not obey the word, some do not believe in Jesus Christ, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. He wants you to win them to Jesus Christ when they see your respectful and pure conduct. I want you to think about this for a second. If you have an unbelieving husband and he sees your care and your honor of him, is that not an attractive thing to him? Is that not you shining Jesus to him? Is that not another weapon in the hands of the Holy Spirit to draw him to himself? It certainly is. Why number 3? Because this is a beautifully winsome thing to do. You're going to see here in this next section, adorning said a couple times. Notice here that adorning this concept of something that you wear or put on, it has this example associated with it. And it's an example of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. And Sarah here is ultimately held up as this model of this new clothing line, this new adorning. And she certainly fits the bill. She was considered beautiful in her time. So beautiful that even as she's an elderly woman, she is desired by kings in that area. She was a beautiful lady, but so how did Sarah model winsome beauty in her time? And here we get into the section of Scripture that might be titled, if it was in a magazine, Sarah's Tips or How-Tos for Beauty. How to be beautiful, number one, stop focusing, ironically, on the external beauty. Right out of the gate, you're going to see that Paul and Peter, Paul does it in 1 Timothy as well, but Peter here is shooting down society's norms. It says this in verse 3, "Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear." In other words, don't strive for the outward show, but the internal glow, because he gets right into the how-to number 2. Start focusing on the internal beauty. But let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart. The heart makes you beautiful. With the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight, hopefully you think his sight is most important, in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God, the believers in God, used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. So a few things here. First, you see this gentle spirit and a quiet spirit. These are words meaning to be steady and settled because of this divinely inspired, inward, faith-based calm. Is that your demeanor? It also means an exercise of God's strength under his control. It's a sense of though the situation, all right, may be difficult, you aren't responding to it in a way that's not under control. Is that your character? Again, this is Sarah's character, and Sarah is also the one who obeyed Abraham, calling him, or continually calling him, that's what that word means, continually calling him Lord. And that's interesting because this concept of he continued to call him Lord, where we only see him referred to as Lord by her once, and that's in Genesis chapter 18. Ironically, when she has just learned that she's going to have a baby when she's old, and she's laughing about it, and she can't get this through her head, and she says, "After I'm worn out and my Lord is old?" I mean, she's old, Abraham's real old, okay, and they're going to have a baby? But did you catch the circumstance in which she called him Lord? You see, when she is caught off guard, when she's just talking off the cuff, when she is in this situation where she's not, putting on airs, okay, she uses a respectful title of her husband. And this shows us that even in her normal life, not in front of other people, but just behind the scenes, this was common language for her. This just rolled off her tongue in that moment. It was second nature to her. It came from a disposition, ultimately an overflow of her heart. Her mouth spoke. It's a revealer of her heart, and it was beautiful. Church, it's that internal beauty that Christ values and desires to see in every member of his bride. Is that internal beauty in you? Are you an honorably submissive person? How to number 3. Do good. Do good actions. It says this, verse 6. And you are her children, Sarah's children, if you do good. Simply put, doing good is the marker of the believer. It's the good inside that eventually comes out. That's Luke chapter 6, verse 45. It's going to come out. What's inside, it's going to come out. Is it coming out of you? Friends, real honor becomes real action, and good action is attractive. A little pastoral side note here, just for those who may be longing for a spouse one day. Just want to encourage you, don't compromise doing good to win anyone's affection. It's not worth it when you meet your final husband, and it's not the way, listen to me, it's not the way to an honorable spouse's heart. In fact, if they aren't won over by a Christ-like and a Christ-honoring love, then you shouldn't be surprised and you shouldn't anticipate a Christ-like love not coming from them down the road. Let me say that again. If they aren't won over by a Christ-honoring love, then you shouldn't anticipate a Christ-like love from them down the road. How to honor number 4. I really like this one. Have fortitude in the face of fear. And do not fear anything that is frightening. Listen, a really frightening thing, don't fear it. Now this is the mark of the Spirit. This comes from 2 Timothy chapter 2. We aren't to be people of fear. We have not been given a spirit of fear from the Lord. I think that's quite relevant for today. But you need to understand this is not an easy thing to these wives back in that time, living this out in that culture. And this definitely was not easy for Sarah to model this on the runway of her life. Consider that she had to leave her homeland. She had to be made vulnerable by her dense husband and his selfish desires twice. And ultimately, she had a baby at 90. I don't think I need to explain. That might be a fearful thing. I, for one, though, I'm glad that this trait was included. When I think back, it was my wife's fortitude, her lack of victim mentality, her personal dexterity that was a very big part of my attraction to her initially. She's definitely still needing those qualities in order to be married to me today. And I still love it when she refuses to shrink back, but instead faces her fears. I think it makes her glow. Okay, enough of a dude trying his best to encourage wives with the word. There's something for the lads. We see it in verse 7. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives, a term meaning with care and intimacy. Live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman. That's right, we are to honor our wives as the weaker vessel. That means physically. Since they are heirs with you of the grace of life. They're your equal before Christ, according to Galatians 3:28, which would concur with this. So that your prayers may not be hindered. Now, that right there is a chivalrous type of response, okay? Especially in this time. It would have been revolutionary. It certainly would have shone as beautiful in this society. But note, it leads off with a likewise. That means this is directly attached to the wife and directly attached to before the wife. You got slaves and masters and you got citizens. Likewise means that the goal for the husband is, again, to be beautifully winsome in this situation. But also, you'll notice, there's no be subject here. This is for the first time in this chain. However, there is an implicit be subject. That the husbands are to be subject under their higher rank, God himself. Why would I say this? Well, note the why. They're to be honoring their wife. To be likewise, okay, honor your wives. Why? Why? So that your prayers may not be hindered. In other words, your eternal husband, if you will, Jesus Christ, is dropping here a not so veiled ultimatum. All right? In other words, you had better honor her or we're going to have problems. She is a fellow heir with you. She's getting an inheritance too, so don't look down on her because she's a woman. Instead, care about her and for her, and then I'll care about your prayers. In summary, I want you to put these two pieces together and think of how beautiful this teaching is when it's exemplified in a marriage. Think of how sweet it is to the onlooker. She is gracious and she chooses to follow her work-in-progress husband even on his worst day. She's got this heart of gold that's routinely on display towards him. She uses beautiful, respect-filled language that boosts and affirms him to become a guy that he otherwise never could be. In turn, he's gentle, he's caring, and he honors her regularly. He serves her as a leader, and he considers her desires, her thoughts, and her needs, even above his own. Now, isn't that the kind of attractive marriage that you want? The question is that the marriage that you enable? It's certainly the marriage that shines Jesus to the onlooking world. Now, to my married friends that often feel alone on Sundays, let me just say this. Even if your spouse does not acknowledge your honor and your care towards him, even if your husband or even your wife does not see this mentality towards them, there is another that does see. Your forever husband does see, and he is moved by your internal beauty. And after all, isn't he, listen friends, isn't he the one that you live to honor? Isn't he the one that you want to be found beautiful before? My takeaway is this: honoring my wife is honoring my God, and ultimately is honorably beautiful to the onlooking world. So I need to be intentionally appreciating and affirming and investing in her, and frankly, doing so more frequently. What's your takeaway? Are you married? And what's one way you can honor your spouse this week? Are you waiting? You have hopes to be married one day? What's one way you can honor your future spouse? By making good choices today. Maybe you're missing your spouse. What's one way you can honor your past spouse going forward? And lastly, will your marriage and your conduct therein be beautiful to the watching spouse and ultimately to the watching world? But most importantly, will it be beautiful before your God and your final husband? Let me leave you with just the last part of our verses for today. I think it's very relevant in this moment and a good way to end off this section. It says this: finally, all of you have unity of mind. We've already heard the word to be sober-minded. Here we're being called to have a harmonious mind, to have sympathy or compassion for each other, to have brotherly love. Means that it keeps going through adversity. A tender heart that's marked by mercy ultimately, and a humble mind like that of Christ. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling in these difficult circumstances, just as Jesus did. But on the contrary, bless, for to this you are called, that you may obtain a blessing. You see, we endure keeping in mind that end reward, just like Jesus did. There's a joy set before him, there's a joy set before us. For whoever desires to love life and see good days, whether they come today or tomorrow, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking lies or deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Abstain from that junk. Let him seek peace and pursue it. Be a peacemaker, not a troublemaker. Right where you are. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. So let's be fearful of the Lord and thereby be found honorable in our situation, even in life's toughest arenas, whether that be as citizens or as workers, or as today we talked about, as spouses. Honor is beautiful. Honor is beautiful. Go be honorable. God bless you as you go.